How you all doing? We made it. Pretty tricky to see whether we were going to be let into the USA, to be honest. We got our gear. We got our gear Wednesday. Yeah. It took nearly 3 weeks for us to get our gear. We lost all of our gear. We're coming into the States. We lost even our clothes and everything. They just don't like the look of me, I think. We'll talk about that. Yeah, it's really strange now how Mary and I get treated in immigration in most countries now. Jim going with my medicine sometimes. We usually get the third degree, as we call it in Australia. And usually it takes us an hour or two longer to go through any court. They sit us down and interview us and take us out of line.
What is their fear? What drives that, would you say?
It's a lot to do with spirits. And more of the spirits fears and how easily influenced people on earth are with regard to the spirits and what they want, which we'll talk about today.
Do they know who you are? Or
well, they know who I claim to be, yeah. They look us up online.
Not initially. But
the spirits do it. So they encourage them to take us out of line. Then it starts. The interview. The customs interview. Immigration interview. Whatever it is.
well, there's customs and there's immigration.
That's right. If we get through one, there's no guarantee we'll get through the other. How's it going out there?
Yeah, they're in nothing. They're not there.
So,
Kimberly, they must have just gone to the bus.
yeah.
So 30 was 30. Monday.
Take away some checks. We could have done half or we could have shrunk the room. Just wait a minute.
So just wait.
Health is very important.
But Jenny, who's Jenny?
Jenny, you made it.
No, not you, Ruthie. You didn't have a sick child, did you? Who's the lady with the sick child? Yeah, hello. I'm glad you made it.
How's it going?
She brought her paper this morning, last night, right after I emailed you guys.
Oh, good. A bit of pressure on everyone coming today. Who felt that? Lots of things happen.
Most of the people who felt it are not here.
Yeah.
That's usually how it works.
So you guys are either oblivious or more strongly rebel.
We suppress much better than they do.
Sorry?
We suppress much better.
Yeah. Hello. Come in.
Yeah.
Who's here for the first time to 20? Wow.
Yeah. Hello, do you get that?
Welcome. Really nice to meet you all.
Yeah. What's the Twilight Zone?
Okay.
All right.
I will get started.
Mary's going to
Do all the housekeeping with you.
be the strict mama looking after you.
Firstly, welcome. Welcome everyone. It's our pleasure to see you here, and I don't know if it's our pleasure to be in San Diego yet, but we were only just arrived Thursday evening, actually, so a couple of days ago, because we had the delay with our equipment, which finally arrived in North Carolina Thursday night, so we could fly here Wednesday night, so we could fly here Thursday to set up this room yesterday. Yeah. We're pleased to be with you today. Can you say it that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to apologise about the parking here. We didn't realise that it was only valet parking, and I understand there's some costs involved with that. We usually try to minimise the cost to everybody coming, but we had some troubles finding a venue in San Diego that we could afford and who would take us. So this is why we're here. If we return, we'll try to do better in terms of ease of access and your parking and so on. Now that we are here today, we're just going to use this back entry as the main entry and exit. So this door will leave, it's still locked. So if there's a fire or any kind of emergency, all these doors will work, but from outside you can't enter here, and we'd like it that way. Just because it's distracting if we're here talking and people are coming in and out of this door. Whereas at the back, you're welcome to come and go as you need to. Does everyone know where the bathrooms are? More or less. If you come out here, you would have seen where you had the table where you got your name tag. There's a corridor just there. The bathrooms are just through the double doors on the left. So, yep, they're there and available. During lunchtime, we can't eat or drink in this room. However, there's 2 courtyards in this hotel. One is pretty much opposite the bathrooms. It's a big open area between this corridor and the foyer. So we're welcome to sit out there and have your lunch. And then on the other side of the foyer, if we fill up that courtyard, there's another one on the other side of the foyer, which you're welcome to use for lunch times. We won't have a long lunch break, just about half an hour, just enough to have something to eat and drinks. We want to thank certain people who helped to get us here to San Diego. So Kimberly and Chang, who you would have met at the check-in, helped with Kimberly really helped with the venue search. Well, both of you did actually. And also they've loaned us a vehicle while we're here, which is wonderful for us to have that freedom. And as well as various kitchen things so that we can eat salad. And lots of things actually, they've just been very welcome.
And water.
Water, yeah. All our essentials, salad and water. So thank you guys. We also want to thank Si, who's helped out. Helped out in the organisation, and in fact it's actually down to his invitation. We were going to come to his living room first, and it got bigger and bigger, and so that's why we're here today. But Si's also helped out with the whiteboard and various other things to help logistically with us being here, so thank you, Si. Heather up the back has helped us out a lot. She helped out with getting us these chairs, helping out with some venue searching, yeah, because she's in the purple, and also a precious blender, which is also part of our for our smoothies. Who else am I got? Anyone? Oh, Mike. Yeah, Mike has actually purchased this speaker setup. We travel. You'll see over here. There's 2 yellow cases that we travel with all of our basic audio gear, so our microphones and transmitters and receivers and antennas. But usually in every place we go, we have to hire speakers and the stands because that's too much for us to travel with in our luggage. Michael kindly purchased this set so that every time we come back to the US, there's something for us to use. So thanks, Mike.
Our goal is to sort of pay Michael back to that, and we may finish up. We were just talking earlier about what we're going to do with the speakers and everything in the longer term, which we haven't sorted out yet, but our goal is to pay Michael back. So part of your donations it might be all your donations, and the donations we get might go towards that. Yeah.
Our aim is to help kind of pay people back for what they've contributed towards us.
Yeah.
I think that's all logistically. as I said, we'll just have 1.5 hour lunch break. If you need to use the restroom or whatever, just do it as needs be. As we mentioned just before I started, there's quite a lot of kind of spirit pressure against this audience being here and hearing from us, which is why we're actually, from Monday till now, we're 50 people less. So we're 120, and I think the guys who said, what are we, 65 in this room now, so it's almost halved. And that's because there's been a lot of opposition to us getting here, even with our gear and with various things that happened on our flight and so on, but also on yourselves. So if you do feel yourself feeling a bit sleepy or going away from yourself, that's just... Oh, mate. Flipping them.
Okay.
No.
I should have a ball up front where I
It's quite interesting for me because often Jesus is presenting and I'm sitting back a little and I get to feel what's happening spiritually, and sometimes when various topics come up that are obviously where there's something for you involved, I see people drift off and then they come back where they're interested in that it's over. So I always say to people, it's a good opportunity if you feel yourself zoning out, just write down what the topic is at the very least, because usually it's something where a spirit is involved in your life and they don't want you to shift in that area. So we'll talk a bit about spirits today. We've been talking a lot about spirits on this whole journey. It's been very interesting for us to travel again after so long and to feel how much opposition, or how contented perhaps it was that spirits were that we just sat at home. We weren't idle, as you'll hear, but maybe tomorrow we'll talk about that. But we weren't really meeting people in person en masse as we have been on this journey. And on this journey we've come to feel either directly or through meeting people and feeling the influences on them, how much spirits are really controlling the lives of many people on earth, and what a serious issue that is for the future, really, for your future soul progression and also for societies at large. So yeah, I'm sure Jesus is going to talk a lot more about, well, we don't know what Jesus is going to talk about today. It's a mystery.
Jesus doesn't even know.
Jesus doesn't know. Hello. So that brings me to questions and microphones. What do you think?
I think we might leave them roaming for a bit first. Yeah.
So what we might do either this afternoon or tomorrow is shift to having you do written questions. As it is, if you have any questions that come up during what we're talking about, please write them down. But in the first session before lunch, you're going to be able to raise your hand and ask questions. If you're in addiction or you just want to make a big statement rather than ask a question, be prepared that we'll just tell you to stop and take the microphone away from you. If you have a sincere question, we want to engage with you. So that being said, I want to show you how to use the microphones well. This benefits not only the people in the room because they can hear you, but also it's helpful for people in future who listen to this recording that they can hear your questions. I know all of you have benefited from listening to other videos, and so this is your way of paying that forward. Okay, so when you receive the microphone, they're always on. They should be left on all day, but be aware that if you bash them into yourself, it will create noise in the recording and in the speakers. When you receive it and you want to ask a question, we just ask that you put it on your chin and your chest. This means that you hold it steady. It's a good way of stabilizing it, because often when you get nervous, you tend to sort of talk like this or something. If it's anchored in 2 points, you get a nice steady sound through it.
And use your free hand to gesture.
Go like this, go like
Not the microphone.
Yeah. All right. So then I will need 2 people who can run the microphone. Chen, do you still want to do that today? Yep. So, and then just someone on the other side of the room. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So when you're the mic runner, so that's Cheng and Aaron at the moment, it's important that you don't shift to the person. So lots of people might put up their hands. Wait till Jesus or I indicate them before you pass the microphone, because some of you get bossy with the microphone handlers and say, no, he's going to talk to me. But you've got to respect the authority up here. Yeah, we can feel lots of things going on for people at various points, and we're particular about who we go to. So, yeah. All right, so that's all for housekeeping, and
Might just actually sort this out.
yeah, okay.
You can talk.
Yeah, Michael? Oh, Fatih? Yeah, okay. We've got some. So, if you want to audio record, you're very welcome to. I suggest putting your phone or device underneath the speaker. That's where you get the best sound.
So if you want to do that now,
Yeah,
you can do
go
that.
ahead.
And put your phone, just remember that you're going to have to keep track of your own phone.
Yeah, and some people leave and then they realise, oh, my phone's still there. So just remember, yeah, that's the way. And we're not taking video recordings on this tour, but some people, you will have. So has anyone been keeping up with this tour online? You've been listening and watching? Yeah, some people. So that's because other people have volunteered to make video recordings, and that's just their copies. So this weekend, Mike is doing that. It's just recording us, so not recording you guys. But just be aware, if you're seated in this row, if you walk in front of it, you'll be blocking the recording. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank
You're
you.
good.
All right. Now we'll wait to see what we're going to talk about today.
Yes. Firstly, just something to bear in mind is that you're our guests. We are your hosts. So that means I'm your boss for the day, not the other way around. So you're not going to be able to boss me around too much. So if you try, you're going to find yourself either asked to stop or persona non grata if you're not careful with how you do it. So what we ask is you treat us with the respect we feel we deserve, given the fact that we're providing a free event to you. So we find the need to say that sometimes because we feel different influences in the room where there's spirit influences and so forth, causing people to get all impatient and so forth. And these kind of things often mean that we end up getting influenced away from the conversation that we would like to have with you. So the conversation I'd like to have with you today, what I'd like to do first is just give you maybe a bit of an introduction, and then we'll talk about what the subject is. So when we were preparing to come here from North Carolina, as Mary said, we were waiting for the stuff to get through customs, our tech to get through customs, which meant that both events in North Carolina we didn't get to record ourselves. So and already by the time we were coming into the States, we tried coming in from Ireland, but we were stopped by US Customs for coming in due to problems with our tech bags, and they stopped. There's a new arrangement that we didn't know about, and that was in customs. There's this clearance going on now in many countries for the US alone. So if you want to come into the US and you're foreign, or you're coming from those countries, you have to go through pre-clearance in the country before you can get on your plane. And if they don't let you through pre-clearance, then basically you don't get your flight either. So that's what happened to us in Ireland. And so we ended up having to reroute everything. We went directly to Canada. And then when we tried to come in again, we had exactly the same problem again in Canada, which meant we had to leave our 2 tech bags behind. And all of these things were sort of orchestrated because the average people who travel like we do don't ever need to leave their tech bags behind. We've in fact talked to some people since who travel with tech, and none of them have ever been stopped with their tech. So, but we have been stopped now 3 times with our tech. Coming into Ireland, there was also one, and then also going out of Ireland to the US, and then obviously coming out of Canada to the US. And this is something that happens to us pretty regularly, where spirits don't want us to go to a certain country, and so they try to just interrupt the whole process as much as they're able. And the people on earth don't really know what's going on because they don't really understand how they get influenced, and they don't understand how things in their life are getting pushed around by the influences of people that they can't see. So anyway, we did get to Carolina eventually, obviously, and then we did our talks the last 2 weekends, and which we enjoyed the company of a lot of people. Some people here came there as well, just a few, and it was quite fun actually. But unfortunately, a lot of it not well recorded. There are some, you could say, video recordings, but there are bits missing and all sorts of things happen with all of that as well. So there's not a complete recording of the events, of both events really, as a result of that. But there's a fair bit of the events you can find online. So then we had to leave. We had to leave North Carolina, come here. And in the process of leaving, we had to get up quite early. A lovely Mexican man come to pick us up with a shuttle, and we get to talk to him a bit about his life. And in the process of talking to people, we love talking to people who run us around and things like that. Not just people who've known divine truth, but people who've never heard about it, right? And so we were talking to him about his family situation and so forth on the way to the airport. And it's interesting, again, what happens with people in terms of their unknown influences. And this was occurring with him as well. But anyway, we got to the airport, we checked into our first flight, and got on the plane, and sitting right next to me was a Christian man who was obviously a Christian preacher as well. And he's also heavily interested in sport. In fact, I suspect he was a sport, what do you call them, a person who goes scout, who goes scouting for sports people. And I saw he was playing these videos, he had his headphones on, he's playing these videos to himself, of himself. Some of them were where he was preaching, and other times where he was talking for sports. So I get to sort of see about him. Anyway, he gets out this book that says 40 Days with Jesus. So it's a course for 40 Days with Jesus. And here he is sitting next to Jesus, and he won't even talk to me. In fact, when we had to get up to go to the toilet, I had to, tap on him inside. He was so absorbed,
detuned from the world.
very detuned from the world around him. Obviously, he was meant to be in first class, but he finished up in our class, which is the lower class. And so he was just very self-absorbed in his things. And he was reading the Bible and noting down some texts for himself, as well as creating this, or being a part of, I'm not sure which, this 40 Days with Jesus. And his great-grandma comes along and says, yeah, that's my great-grandson. So she's in the spirit world, obviously. So she's there sitting with us, talking to Mary and I, and we're next to this man who thinks in Jesus, and believes in God, and obviously believes he's practicing Christianity. So he has a whole set of beliefs, a whole set of belief systems. And those belief systems obviously haven't changed very much in him, obviously, because he's unable to even connect just to a fellow passenger and have a chat. Right? When you love people, you want to do things like that. You want to talk to them, find out about them. Yeah. So Mary and I, when we sit next to somebody, we talk to them, and find out about their life and what they're doing with it and all those kind of things. But he never gave us that opportunity even. If he had we might have been able to have a conversation of some kind about what he was interested in. But because he was so self-focused and self-absorbed, he wasn't able to do that. And obviously the spirits with him also did not know that who we are, even though they were so-called Christian spirits in the spirit world. And we find that quite interesting as well, because it always means that they are Christian spirits who are in the first sphere who have yet to progress. Anyway, his own great-grandma had obviously progressed, but she didn't actually know, was it? No, that she did know who we were. So she came and said, yeah, that's my great-grandson. You're not going to be able to talk to him. He's pretty self-absorbed. So, you're not going to be able, I'm just saying, he's my great-grandson. That's it. So we managed to have a bit of a chat with her. And so his belief systems were, to a large degree, guiding what he believed was real, what he believed is reality. Anyway, we got off that plane in Charlotte, in North Carolina, and we had to get another plane that connected to here, to San Diego. And in the what do you call it, the gate lounge, I suppose you would call it, we were waiting for our flight, and there's another group of fellows who sit next to us, and they're all Christian guys too. When I say Christian, I'll use that term quite loosely, shall I? But anyway, these were...
We didn't know they were Christian at the time.
No, but it was quite obvious to me as soon as they sat down. Anyway, we were interested in the last guy in particular because he was doing some video editing, and I was watching him do his video editing while he was there at the lounge. Initially, when we arrived, he was sort of asleep on the lounge, and then he woke up and did some video editing. And he was editing, like Mary and I have to do sometimes, edit videos. And so we were just interested in what notebook he had and so forth. So once we could start a conversation, I started the conversation with the guy right next to me, who was obvious to me that he was the leader of these three people. And asked him, where he's from. And he was from the USA. And asked him, what he's doing. He said, we're traveling all around the world, preaching. We have a ministry, a world ministry. And I asked him, how many people are following him? He said, 3.5 million people follow him on YouTube. And he's been to every country aside from Antarctica, he said. And every continent, aside from Antarctica. And anyway, it was obvious to us too that he was sort of the leader of the group. And he was unwilling to talk further, but he got up and he was boarding in first class. So he went, and the other two fellas were there. And we got to talk to the guy who was doing the editing. We asked him a few questions. And eventually he told us that they were a part of a ministry that talking about Jesus, and he's been visited by Jesus, he said. And he because of that visit, he stopped. He was a drug dealer, I think he said he was, and he stopped being a drug dealer, and he became. And he said the angels told him to go and help this other fellow who was the leader of their team to preach the word, and so they told him to go and preach the word. And the way this guy does it is he does all the videoing and all the audio for the guy who's preaching, who calls himself, and later we found out, calls himself an apostle. And then we asked, well, how do you raise the money to do all this? What's going on there? And he said, we do most of the things we do on YouTube for free and everything else, but we have a sort of a tiered system where if you want access to the apostle, there's if you want an hour access a month, you have to pay $500 a month to access the apostle. But if you want, I think he said 5 minutes was $20 a month.
Oh, no, you don't know.
No access. No access. There were all these other scales. There was no access to the apostle unless you paid $500 a month. And that's how they raise their funds to all go travelling and all do this thing. And it was interesting because while at the same time he was talking, his grandmother came to talk to us. So she's talking to us while he's talking to us. Yeah. And she's saying, I didn't know you guys were on Earth. So she's talking to us saying, I didn't know you guys were back on Earth. That's amazing. And she's saying, can you talk to our son? I said, well, it's pretty hard, to talk to your son when he's already doing this other thing. And she said, yeah, this is not good. I thought it was really good getting him out of the drugs, but now he's in this other thing, and now it's almost just as bad because, you know what I mean? He's got all these beliefs now that have been firmly established through experiences he's had that he firmly believes in. And of course, he firmly believes that Jesus came to him. He firmly believes that Jesus told him to go with this guy. This guy is speaking the truth. He firmly believes that. And he treats the guy as he said, like a father, even though they're the same age, probably, I think. Or he might have even been older than the guy. Probably same age, I would say. And so it was really interesting, the dynamic of everything going on there as well. And again, it was all based upon beliefs. So the guy himself, who was the leader of the group, who views himself as apostle, I can't remember his first name, but Mary, no. And he views himself as the apostle. He has a set of beliefs of what he believes in, and he believes that to be true. And then next to him, there was obviously they've had personal experiences, different spirits coming on, having personal experiences. And these particular experiences then cause them to believe that what they're doing is right or righteous. Right? And so after thinking about all of that as our experience, so obviously we got on the plane afterwards, and as the guy was walking past me, I had one of my jumpers on, pullovers, I suppose you call them. Sweater, pullover, what do you call them? Pullover, sweater, okay. So I had a sweater on. It was one of these very colourful things that I wear. And he made a reference to Joseph wearing the coat of many colours as he was passing. And that was the last we saw of them, except landing in San Diego. We just saw them at a distance.
There was quite
a number of... Oh no, we saw him coming out of the toilet as well one time, and he smiled again at us, and he had so many opportunities to talk to us.
And almost like his grandmother was saying, I really would like you guys to talk to him.
And then she realised that it's going to be tough to try to sort out.
Saying, that's not, we've got to respect his free will and all of these things.
Yeah.
But he had some kindness.
Kindness, yeah.
This fellow, he felt like he really shifted the course of his life and been benefited, and that he wanted to benefit others. So,
yeah. But it was all driven by what you would classify as a spirit interaction, which he trusted as an interaction with Jesus. And see, this is the problem, is that a lot of the times we don't realise that we have experiences because we want them, not because they are righteous, but because we want them. And we have experiences and sometimes these experiences cause us to change our entire belief system. Our entire beliefs change, sometimes in a moment, right? The belief changes. And many people have experienced this with regard to, having like drugs or alcohol problems, and then all of a sudden having a transformative experience where they then believe, now I've become a Christian, and because Jesus appeared to me, or an angel appeared to me and told me that's what I must do, so that's what I must do. And because it is a real experience with somebody coming to them, not necessarily the person they claim, but somebody who claims to be that person has come to them, they then feel that experience is real, and therefore it guides them oftentimes the rest of their life on it, the rest of their entire life. So why have I said all that to you? And the main reason why I've said all that is because I want to talk to you about this subject. Beliefs matter. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is because what we notice is that many, many people don't understand how their beliefs have been created, and more don't understand the effect of their beliefs upon the future of their existence, their life. And there are so many areas of belief that we can establish within us quite firmly that we believe to be true when they're not actually true. They could actually be false. And if they're false, there will be a negative influence upon the rest of our existence until we change that belief. Now, Probably a best way to refer to that is that imagine you were here in San Diego and you had to drive or you had to get to San Francisco, let's say, where Michael lives. But also imagine that somebody told you that the way to go to San Francisco was via Peru. And if you came to believe that, you came to be convinced, right? Can you see it'll take you further away from your goal if you followed that advice than it would bring you towards? But if you believe that is true, can you see it's going to be very hard for somebody else to come along then and say to you, no, that's completely wrong. So now you've got two beliefs, one being presented by one person saying, convinced that you've got to go via Peru, and the other convinced that, no, that's not the way to do it. And now you're presented with two beliefs, and you've never done it before, and let's say you don't have a map and you don't have any way of knowing what to do, because this is really, in a lot of ways, it's how we feel life to be, isn't it? Where we don't have a map, we don't really know what to do. And so people come along and advise us to do things. I just have a cough. They come along and advise us, and in the process of advising us, we don't know which one is telling the truth. And sometimes people can be so convinced they're right, can't they? And then it ends up that actually they were wrong. And so if you're trusting of the person's personal conviction and basing your decision on their conviction, then that is also quite a dangerous thing to do, isn't it? Because in the end, they could be personally convinced of the accuracy of what they're suggesting to you, while at the same time can be completely unaware. And then there's also the situation where some people might be aware, but they might have reasons for telling you what they're telling you. So example, let's say you're going on a trip alone, but you've got a partner, and the guy who's saying you should go via Peru is actually interested in your partner. Now, his goal could be, get him away from his partner for longer, and I'll have a chance, right? In other words, he'd have a malicious goal, right, in terms of leading you astray. And frequently people do have malicious goals for leading us astray. Most of us would like to believe that people are not like that, but unfortunately there is a lot of people on this planet, as you can tell by the way the planet's working. There are a lot of people who are quite malicious, who are willing to lead others astray. So there might be the motive to lead astray, or there might be the motive to just, to believe in themselves, and they're telling you something with conviction because they believe in themselves. And there might be also the motive that they feel like they want to help you, but they don't know themselves. And so they've never done it themselves, they've never had the experience themselves, but they think they can help you. So you could say that's an arrogant motive, but there's plenty of people who are like that. And so a lot of times it can be malicious, but other times it can be sort of innocent. And then other times it can be really motivated by their personal addictions as to what they tell you and what they suggest to you. And in the end, if you believe them, you will be very, very tempted to follow their advice, if you believe them. So the net result is going to be, for your personal life, that if you believe something, whether that is a suggestion from people, whatever their condition, or it's something that you internally believe for yourself, the net result is going to be that that is going to guide the future direction and choices of your life. You are going to change the decisions based on what you believe. And so, for that reason, beliefs matter. But then the question becomes, well, what are the most important beliefs that matter the most? Versus what are the beliefs that matter the least? Because obviously, if there's beliefs that are in a hierarchy in terms of their influence over your life, can you see those beliefs that matter most are going to have the most influence on the choices and decisions of your life. And the beliefs that matter to you the least will have the least effect, probably, in the decisions of your life. And your priorities of your beliefs are going to be different to the priorities of somebody else's beliefs. So if we could think about beliefs for a moment, we can see that there's a priority system for beliefs. Now, that priority system is a personal priority system. It's what you think is important. And that's different to what other people think is important. Now, if we incorporate God into the mix, can you see God would have a priority system as well? So now we've got what God thinks is important versus what you think is important versus what other people think is important. So now we've got all sorts of priorities that are potentially either in or out of harmony with God's priority system. And this priority system of your beliefs will determine the choices you make and how important they are to you. An example of that is, let's say one thing that's very important to you is, let's say, your personal comfort. So let's just call it comfort. That's very important to you. So when anything makes you uncomfortable, if comfort is high on your priority list, can you see you're probably not going to do the thing that makes you uncomfortable? Right? Now, actually, that's the reason why 50 people are not here today who were booked. Yeah. Right? Because their comfort was more important to them than truth was. Right? So what happens then is we're weighing up the pressures that come upon us, and we'll talk about that in a minute, with the comfort we're experiencing. And when we start getting more and more and more uncomfortable, when comfort is an important thing to us, can you see we're going to want to readdress that imbalance so that we get comfort back again? And so if the thing that we identify is making us uncomfortable has to be given up for the sake of our comfort, we will give that up. Because in our internal priority system, comfort is the thing that matters. Now, I'm sure you would already know this, but in the USA, that is one of the highest priorities of life, isn't it? Comfort. And in fact, we see that in almost every Western country. Comfort is one of the highest priorities. So whenever you become uncomfortable, it's treated as a bad thing. You see, but if God's view and the Earth's view is completely different, we'll talk about this in a sec, then can you see, to become a part of how God sees things, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. So now if we've got comfort as a priority, and God's saying, no, you need to get out of where you are now and change into this new place in order to be more in alignment with truth, and you're going, well, that's uncomfortable though. That's going to make me more uncomfortable. And God's going, no, it's actually going to make things better, but if you're going to measure comfort based on addiction, then of course, yes, you're going to have discomfort, and you're going to have to go through the feeling of discomfort. So if we're going through the feeling of discomfort, under the circumstances where I've put my priority system with comfort, and I believe that comfort matters, and in fact, for most of us, we believe that comfort means we're getting loved. Can you see the relationship? We often believe we're being loved when we're comfortable. So when we believe we're loved, and we have an internal justification system that says, but I'm being loved when I'm comfortable, and this feels uncomfortable, so it's off. I can't do that. And so a lot of people, and this is something we've found even in our trip, so here's another example where beliefs matter. If your belief is that truth is more important to you than anything else, you believe that truth provides freedom. If you believe that, then can you see that if you're a bit uncomfortable to receive some truth, or even a lot uncomfortable in order to receive truth, you would still have a priority system of wanting to receive the truth rather than focus on comfort. But if comfort is an internal feeling inside of you, where you believe that is the thing that matters, can you see you're going to now discard truth for the sake of comfort? Right? And many, many people do this all their lives. This is how people who don't really like each other live together for 60 years. Right? Because they feel that it's more comfortable being together than it is being apart. So they don't care really about the truth that they're not really attracted to each other anymore, or they don't really get along anymore. They care more about the comfort of the relationship or the financial stability of that relationship. My mother and father have been married now for 61 years. They're both alive soon. Been married for 61 years. For probably 2 years of that, they liked each other. And if they heard me say that, of course, one day they might. You know, and they'd be sort of distressed at that. But the truth is that my father had a lot of control over my mother and so forth, and there were problems in their marriage, and there was all sorts of things going on that caused different angers to rise up in both of them with each other, which of course they decided to suppress, because their beliefs are you don't resolve something by talking about it. You resolve it by making out it's not there. Right? Now this is very common, isn't it? A very common belief. It's an emotional belief that if you have to go through hard feelings, having to have a conversation with your partner, it's far better to not have the conversation. Because comfort, the thing we just wrote on the board, matters more than resolving a problem. Not understanding, of course, that if you resolve the problem, you'd probably be more comfortable, right? Most people don't sort of get that. So they let the situation develop over time, where eventually they don't really get along that well. But they're okay with that. They detune from the feelings of it, of not getting along, and they would rather just put up with the small amounts of discomfort that they believe will be better than what they believe is the large discomfort that's going to come with a breakup. Now, in the case of my family, my parents are very religious, so one of the major discomforts they would have is the feeling that God would judge them if they broke up, that marriage is for life. You know, that this is what people on earth are told. Of course, it's not true. And when I say it's not true, from God's perspective, there's only one romantic relationship that's for life, and that's the soulmate relationship. And every other romantic relationship you have is not for life. It's not going to be forever. And so therefore, it makes sense, doesn't it, that if you married your soulmate, well, sure, you might be with them forever. But if you haven't married your soulmate, then you're definitely going to break up at some point in the future. That's the truth. But the average person on earth doesn't want to accept that. They want to accept a number of things, including the idea that I'm allowed to choose. Again, my beliefs matter. If I believe that I'm allowed to choose my partner, that also circumnavigates around the fact that God created a dual soul, where the souls separate into two at the time of incarnation, and you actually have a soulmate, and that's the person who's designed to be your partner for the rest of your existence, actually. Now, most people on earth don't accept that, but we'll talk a bit more about what things are important in terms of priorities, in terms of what to accept. But if we look at the priority system, the very first set of priorities of beliefs, where beliefs matter, are beliefs about God. They are the ones that are going to affect your life the most. They change the future direction of your entire existence. And what I mean by that is that if you do not believe in God finish up having a relationship with God, not just a belief, but a relationship with God, then you will never ever grow beyond the sixth sphere of the spirit world. You will be limited in your growth from there on, because to grow beyond that point requires receiving information, emotional information from God. And if you don't have a relationship with God, you won't understand anything about what you're trying to receive. So if you don't have a belief in God, there's a major thing it's going to cause, and that is there's going to be one course of action is you'll become the perfect natural human, and that's what you'll always be. And then the other will be that you can grow beyond that. You can receive some of God's nature and become what we call a celestial spirit or a divine angel, or and it's a different path of existence for a future. But it's up to you, and your belief will greatly determine whether you choose one road or the other. And people can come along like Mary and myself and try to talk to you about the opportunities this way, that God's way affords you. But if you don't believe it, you're not going to do it. And if you don't do it, then you'll never experience it. And this is the trouble with our beliefs, is that if we don't believe something that's true, then we're never going to experience the results of that truth. And if we believe things that are false, we're going to receive the consequences of belief in a false thing, which are always disappointing, always unhappy, always sad results. And so our beliefs matter, and particularly our beliefs in God and what we believe God is matters. So we're not talking about here just believing in God. We're talking about how do you believe in God? What do you believe God is? And when we're talking about your belief, it's not just what you think in your mind God is, but it's mostly what you feel in your heart God is. And what you feel in your heart will be very, very different to what you think in your mind. Right? So in your mind, you might say, God exists. In your mind, you might have felt that you've resolved that. But if you don't feel God exists, then how are you ever going to have a relationship with God? Because the relationship is based on feelings, not on your thoughts. So we need to examine the beliefs about God as to our priority system, and my suggestion is to examine those beliefs first, because they are the ones that determine the ultimate trajectory of your existence. Right? Now, the next set of beliefs that are important too is what you believe it is to be a human. So beliefs about the human soul are the next important set of beliefs. So do you believe the human soul is a part of God already? Do you believe the human soul is a singular thing or a dual thing? In other words, do you have a soulmate? Do you believe the human soul has emotions? Or do you think it's all intellect? What do you believe the human soul actually is? Not what do you think it is, but what do you feel it is inside of you? Do you feel that your body is the human soul? There are some Christian faiths actually believe that the soul is the body. And when the soul, they say, when you die, your soul dies. And in fact, in the Bible, there's actually many, many verses that say that when you die, your soul dies. They call them dead souls, right? In the Bible, let's see. And then there's others who believe, no, the soul is the spirit body. You know, what you are when you become a spirit. That's your soul. And so when we talk about the idea of a soul, when we're talking to different groups of people, often it's the hard thing first is to establish what they believe it is. Because quite often we can use the same word. So let's say I use the word soul in our discussions, but you believe the word soul means spirit body. So every time I say soul, you're thinking spirit body. And imagine with the word God, if you believe that you are a part of God, Every time I say God, you're going to say me. You're going to think me. But if you believe God is a triune God, you're going to, when I say God, you're going to say, well, which part of God? Jesus, God, or the Holy Spirit? Is what you're going to think inside of you. But if you believe, like many people do, that God is in nature, when I say God, you're going to go nature inside of you. You're going to think that. So your interpretation of the word is totally governed by your belief system. Totally governed by it. And if I don't know what your interpretation is, and I'm the one trying to communicate a thought to you, and I don't understand your own interpretation of what I'm trying to conceive, and I'm using words that you already think mean something else than what I think they mean, can you see? We're going to be like on two different planets talking the same words, but they'll mean two different things. So on your planet, God means you. On my planet, God means individual, entity, universal being, creator of everything. And now when I talk about God, you're thinking you, and I'm thinking universal creator. Can you see? We're not talking about the same thing, even though we're using the same word. And the same applies when we talk about the soul. If I'm talking soul and you're thinking you're the complete unit, and I'm thinking half of the soul, when I'm talking, you're half of one, and sometimes I'll talk about the whole soul, and then sometimes half. You go, what's this half whole thing? Because there's just one soul to me, like, do we mean soul groups, or do we mean some other concept, And so it's very, very hard, isn't it, using language, even if we're both speaking English or both speaking Spanish, it's very, very hard that when we use the word, that we even know that the other person's thinking the very word that we're thinking about when we're using that word. So it's very, very difficult to actually converse about beliefs when people already believe and they have an established knowledge about the very thing you're discussing. Now, the difficulty for Mary and I is that almost everybody on earth at some point, even if they're not Christian, of a Christian faith, they all believe that, there's been 2,000 years of books, you could say 1,700 years, I suppose you could say, of books created about our life and what we taught. And every single thing that is in those books could be true or could be false, based upon how people interpreted things at the time when they wrote the information, bearing in mind that the very books can't, as otherwise claimed, they can't be traced back to the source. And also, even if they were, there was no guarantee that the original person using the word meant the same thing I meant when I was talking to them about that word. Because of this problem of what goes on inside of me with my priority system and my beliefs. So that's what I thought I'd like to talk with you about today. I want to talk about some beliefs, and rather than sort of go, how do you determine what is right and wrong? Honestly, that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to understand initially when we talk about beliefs, because if you don't believe in the method I teach you about how to determine right and wrong, you're not going to use that method anyway. Right? And if you believe your interpretation of what I'm teaching about how to determine a belief, and you believe that I believe and you believe the same things, then you can, and when we believe very different things, can you see we can easily get ourselves in a great big mess without there being any real confirmation of the belief. So I would rather just say these things are true, these things are false. That makes sense? Now, in time, you can, if you're humble or open or seeking truth, you can work out whether you want to know whether that's true or false, and you can also work out which one of these things is a high priority for you to work out whether it's true or false. But I would recommend to you that anything relating to God is the highest priority, because if God does exist, Can you see that changes almost everything with regard to decisions, future, life, everything? Because if God exists, then the next set of questions are going to become, well, what is God like? You know, what's God's character? What's God's nature? What's God's personality? Can I have a relationship with God? All those questions start popping up once I recognise that God may exist. But if I believe I'm God, or I believe that God is nature, or in other words, I already know who God is, or if I believe that God is energy, an energy system of some kind, just as universal energy that I receive, then we're talking about completely different things. And if what we're talking about is a belief that we hold on to, and it's not true, it's going to have a long-term detrimental effect on my choices and decisions that I make for my future. Right? The next set of things would be, does God have laws? Because if God has laws, can you see, it'd be really important for me to know what they are. If there's universal being, who created the human soul and also created the structure in which the human soul exists, then it would make sense that my best course of action is to find out what those laws are and live by them, because I'll be happier if I do. Right? But if I disobey the law, is there penalties? I need to know that too, because if there is penalties for disobeying the law, then I need to know what they are and, you know, and start weighing up whether I should disobey the law or not. You know, some of you would recognise on Earth that, you know, there's a speed limit, right? I notice here in the States there's speed limits everywhere, just like there is in our country. Hardly anybody follows them. You know, we were driving here, there's 35 and 45, it was on the way here. 35 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour. And when we were in 35, everyone was doing 45. And when we were in 45, everyone was doing about 50, 55. Is that normal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Safe speed.
Sorry?
It's a safe speed.
Safe, so it's a safe speed. Is that how everybody sees it? I'm sure the police on the side of the road, when they've got a radar gun, don't see it that way. But,
Is there radar guns in the US?
yes, but this is what we convince ourselves. Our beliefs, you see, our belief is, well, that says 35, but it doesn't really matter. 45 is mine. And to be honest, if it didn't say 35, we'd probably be doing 70. You know, because what we're often doing, see, even the belief that you can get away with 10 miles an hour more. Can you see that's a decision, isn't it? That's being made. And I see the sign, and just even seeing the sign triggers this belief. I can get away with 10 more. And so I do 10 more. And so most of us have learned to be unruly. You guys in America, you're so unruly. You even know you're unruly, right? Yeah. So most of you are very unruly, no respect for authority generally. But let's say God's laws are not like that. Let's say you cross the boundary, that's it. Now, can you see that if I have the belief that if I cross the boundary, everything should be fine still, versus if I cross the boundary, it's not going to be fine, can you see that's going to change my decisions?
Yeah.
It's like driving along the road, seeing 35 and going, 35 it is, versus driving along the road, seeing 35 and going, 45 it is. So I'm making decisions. It's funny, in Europe, we were in Europe, and they have these speed signs, which are really crazy to me, which just say no speed. Like, it just says not 40. It's kilometres an hour over there, so it's not 40 or not 80. And I'm going, well, I know I'm not meant to go 40, but what do? Do I go, does that mean I can go unlimited, or does that mean I have to go 20, or I got no idea what not something means. It's far better, wouldn't it be, to have a sign that this is what I'm allowed to do. And of course, God has done this a lot, and we don't recognise where the signs are, but that's in our conscience, and we frequently don't understand the conscience either. In fact, most people on earth don't believe in the conscience anymore. They don't even believe they have one anymore. And if you don't believe the human soul is designed with a conscience, then you've got no way of finding out what the law is, aside from experimenting and breaking it, and then having the consequence or the penalty of breaking it. So it's far better if you understood the design of the human soul has a conscience. You far better understand how God gives information to that conscience. So in other words, it's far better that you're educated. Can you see that? Now, isn't that true in day-to-day life? Isn't it far better that you're educated? Yeah? Because when you're educated, you can make wiser decisions. Right? So beliefs that are just what you imagine are true is not education. For beliefs to benefit you, they must be facts. So there's a difference between a belief and a fact, isn't there? A fact is what is actual fact in reality, what is actual truth, as if there is a God, God's established it to be. What is the actual fact versus what do I think is the fact, which is really a belief. There's a huge difference between what I think is fact and what is actual fact. But most of us don't even contemplate that very deeply for the most part, because most of us think what I think is fact is fact. I want to feel that it's fact, because if I can feel it's fact, then I don't need to change. I don't need to adjust. I don't need to make an arrangement where something changes inside of me where I accept the fact. So a lot of times we create beliefs inside of ourselves because we don't want to accept facts. So remember I said earlier about the married couple married together. They don't want to accept the fact that they don't really like each other very much. They don't want to accept that fact. It doesn't matter to them that they don't even really like each other very much, because other things are more important to them than that. Right? But if they understood the bliss of living with someone who you actually like, they would never consider doing it. Because it's far more beautiful living with someone you actually enjoy, isn't it, than someone you don't. Right? So if they understood that fact, the fact that if you live with someone you enjoy, you're going to enjoy your life more. If they understood that fact, can you see, they might go, well, I'm not enjoying my life with this person, so I need to fix that. Now that might mean having conversations that are difficult initially, and it might even get to the point where there's a breakup, right? Because you can't agree on the facts. So if my set of beliefs are different to Mary's, it's going to make relationship very difficult. And it doesn't really matter where my beliefs are different to Mary's. Like if my beliefs about emotion is different to Mary's, then can you see every time I or Mary have an emotion, we're going to be in disharmony with each other. But if my beliefs about God are in disharmony with Mary's, then every time God comes up, and by the way, if God is the highest thing on the priority system, it should come up pretty often, and that comes up and there's disagreement of the facts, then obviously there's also going to be disharmony in the relationship. So a part of our life we need to come to understand, and that is if we're going to have a smooth, enjoyable existence with other people involved in our life, then at some point there's going to have to be some agreement about the facts. What are the facts? So what is the fact about what is love? You know, we both need to come to agreement with what is love, right? Now, in order to come to that agreement, there's a few ways we can do it. One way is that we can compromise each other's facts until we think we agree, but we're still inside emotionally still not agreeing with each other, are we? So we're still, in fact, in disagreement. The other is that we both make adjustments where I listen to Mary's point of view and, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I look at my own point of view and I go, I can see Mary's point of view is probably stronger there, so what I've got to do is probably get rid of my point of view and accept Mary's, and then Mary does the same with me, and eventually through this process of resolution, you could say, we get to the point where we agree on the same matter. That's going to make our life more enjoyable, but The real question is it the real fact? So both of us could agree on a fact that is actually not a fact. It's just what we would like to be the fact. Right? So can you see, if God hasn't determined the fact, and I am not accepting God's facts, and Mary is not accepting God's facts, can you see it's going to be hard for us to also come to an agreement? And even if we both agree on something that is not a fact, then both of us are now consigned to a harder life. We're both going to have sadness and other emotions come up because at some point in the future we'll realise we didn't agree on the facts, or what the facts actually were. So your beliefs matter. Your beliefs matter. Your beliefs about God matter. Your belief about the human soul matters. Your beliefs about God's law matters. And of course there's other beliefs that are less important that also matter. As I've said in previous discussions, this true right the way down to how you wipe your bottom matters. How you do little things matters, because there are all sorts of things that are either in alignment with the priority system, in alignment with what is truth or not. And the key for us to do is to determine what that is. And it's not my responsibility to force you or have an argument with you or to have constant disagreements with you until you come to determine the facts. Right? That's a personal responsibility. Right? Every single one of us, if we are going to have a life that is going to be self-determining, we are going to need to come to terms with what the facts are individually. And we are going to need to put a priority on it individually. We're going to need to make the decision individually. And it doesn't matter what Jesus or Mary or Joe down the street or someone across the road or my mum and dad or my children or anybody else thinks about that. At some point, I am going to have to come to terms with what I believe and whether those beliefs are factual, whether they are real or not. And whether if they are real, do I even believe it matters whether they're real or not? Because a lot of people do not believe it matters. Don't believe it matters. What? And this is what I'm saying. Beliefs do matter. Yeah? So questions? Microphone. No microphone.
Could you say beliefs matter because truth exists, and that's the issue? People do not actually understand it as a standard. Right? Don't they kind of corollary?
Yeah, it's not just because truth exists, though. There's also a consequence for believing the truth and a consequence for believing a lie. And those two consequences are vastly opposed to each other. In other words, the consequence for believing truth always results in happiness. The consequence for believing lies, as many of you already know, always results in some kind of misery. That's the consequence. So the belief matters because if I believe in what is the lie, then misery is also probably going to be the result. And if I believe in what is true, then happiness will also probably be the result. So it matters not just on a philosophical level, but also on a personal, emotional one.
It's also like, isn't it, that beliefs are like the governing body inside of you, if you like. They're what
They motivate your direction.
That's your beliefs govern what choices you make from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, and then often
Even in your sleep
state. Your beliefs are the things that sort of drive your motivations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
very, very important that we come to terms with the fact that our beliefs do matter. They're not. See, a lot of people will go, as long as I'm a nice person, it doesn't really matter what I believe. Now, how many times have you heard that? Yeah, we've heard that a lot, right? Well, what's your definition of a nice person? Your belief about that will matter. Right? Even your belief about what is a nice person matters.
very much.
Right. Because if you're not, you think you're being a nice person, but actually from God's perspective you're not, or from a factual position you're not, then unhappiness will be the result of you taking your beliefs of love to be down that track. It's going to be difficult. So your beliefs matter in almost every way you can think. Your future direction, your current life, your future happiness, your relationships, your friendships, everything you choose to do, the decisions you make, how important those decisions are to you, every one of them is guided by your beliefs at some level. And so every one of your beliefs do matter. Now, of course, if there's a priority system on your belief, there's some beliefs that matter more than others, right? But every belief, if it's not in harmony with truth, will at some point matter. And it's not going to just matter in a philosophical manner. It's going to matter because it actually will hurt, because there's actually happiness involved in your belief. That's a big reason why it matters. Yeah? Then Mike over here.
You just keep your hand up.
Keep your hand
Let's
up.
answer this.
No mistake. No.
Hi, thank you. Growing up in India as a Hindu
Yep.
and following your
Bit closer with the chin.
Just
Sorry,
That's
That's
it.
better.
That's it.
growing up in India as a Hindu and still visiting there because I have family there,
Yep.
and following your teachings for the last 7 years,
Yep.
I'm struck by the level of resistance that I run into constantly.
Yes.
I have great appreciation for the amount of resistance you run into in your personal lives,
Yeah.
because I run into it with the Christian people I interact with here,
Yes.
and I run into it with the Hindus I interact with in India.
Yes.
And most of them, when I ask, what is your faith? What do you believe God is? They don't have an answer because they actually do not know. So my question was, if you could talk about what I'm realizing is alarmingly so, more than 99.99% of our beliefs are set in stone by the family we grew up in and our parents, and as you have discussed many, many times in your videos. But the level of that resistance to change is so profound that, as you said, beliefs matter, but most of my beliefs are not even mine. I have inherited them as I have inherited a lot of things.
That's not something I would agree with totally. You're saying 99.9% of your beliefs are family, but actually it's more like about 20%.
That's good.
Because what actually happens inside of you is, as you're growing up, you compare your life that you're experiencing with the family. And in the process of doing that, you come to conclusions that your family might not have agreed with. And often you come to those conclusions internally. So you don't express them, you don't voice them, but they are now established inside of you as emotions, where you're in a disagreement. So an example of that is, let's say in your family, there was a feeling that you should shut down your emotions. But every time you did that, you got sick. So what you've chosen after that, you go, well, every time I do that, I get sick, so I shouldn't do that. So now your beliefs are different to your family's. So just because you had a family of origin, and just because that family had a set of beliefs, it doesn't guarantee that all of your beliefs will be their beliefs. What matters more, in fact, in terms of setting up your internal belief system, is your memories. And in this trip, we've talked to people about what the memories are. They're a combination of your feelings, your senses, what happened with all of your senses, and your feelings and your emotions and your experiences. So if we look at that, we can say, sensorily, there were times when you were touched. So you've experienced a sense of touch. That's stored as a memory. Now, if the touch was hurt, your body, as you know, it's got limits, right, in terms of pain. So if the touch was painful, that's stored as a painful memory. If your touch was pleasurable, that's stored as a pleasurable memory. So the same goes with your sense of smell. So imagine your sense of smell, you smell something and it smells terrible. That you know, don't put your nose too close to that thing again, right? So that's a memory that's been now established. And so your experiences are not just the experiences of what you've been taught to experience as a child, but they incorporate all of your personal experiences and all of your sensory apparatus in your body, passing all this information, as well as what is stored in your mind, as well as what feelings are stored within you, as well as the family paradigm, the culture paradigm, the religious paradigm, and all those other belief systems are also a part of that. So it's a lot more complicated than just saying 99.9% of everything comes from them, because there's your experience, which most people value more than others' experiences. So what happens is that if your experience, whatever happened there, will greatly determine the beliefs that you now have imbibed.
Yeah, and also what you're describing, interestingly, is that, so you were describing when you go to India and people can't really articulate their belief about God, often they have a cultural or familial belief that I must fit in. And it's nothing to do with God, but it's governing what they call their beliefs about God or their spiritual life. And that belief, that change, then they would be open to have feelings about God or explore that. But often we call that a belief about God, but it's actually a belief about family. I must fit in. If I'm not a part of this system, who am I? These kinds of beliefs. So
yes, no, that's exactly what you just said is exactly that, because I realized I was one of the fortunate ones who had always rebelled. I was the outlier.
Correct.
So I never fit in. And
Correct.
it didn't make sense. And I was just talking to my sister sitting here, and we both didn't fit in.
Yes.
And to date, our mother cries that she let us leave the country. And
It's all America's
all
fault.
all her friends are within 10 miles, their kids are within 10 miles,
Yeah.
their grandkids are within 20 miles.
Yeah.
And here my 95-year-old father and 84-year-old mother are living alone independently in India.
Yeah.
And so she, she's laying the guilt trip on us constantly
Of course.
about how we abandoned them.
Yeah.
But I keep saying that's the best gift you gave us, knowingly or unknowingly, but that's exactly it. The need to fit in. Because, I think that if you didn't have this internal questioning mind, which I'm learning I must have had since childhood as my memories come back, I would never have been saved, because I would be, in the paradigm that we were raised in, which is so strong in India, with the number of souls.
It's a good thing you raised too about the questioning mind. Because that's really about you becoming like a child, being willing to question everything that comes at you, isn't it? But many of us are not willing for all sorts of reasons. Some of them are family reasons, some of them are cultural, but also a lot of them are about what we already think God is, and what we already think the human soul is, and what emotions we believe we can cope with. So, bear in mind that it's not just as cut and dried as 99% family, the rest. It's a lot to do with your experience and also your personality, as you can see in yourself. There's a personality of wanting to discover truth, right?
Yeah.
Which is obviously not something that the rest of your siblings, other than the two of you.
We're only two, so.
Yeah. Oh, you're the only two siblings.
We're the only two.
Oh, right. Okay.
So early on in the path, I felt my grandfather come to me.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience, actually. Right after I had the God, the feeling that I could feel God, which was after I started listening to you for about a year. That was the beginning of my journey. And when I felt my grandfather, I said, wow, to have somebody, I'm sure he's on this path, or I don't know, but I felt that he might be, which is so unusual given that.
Where his background?
Yes, Hindu background.
Yeah,
yes, because
right.
it is so unlikely to be a case. But the thing is, I never questioned your teachings. That's what's so interesting. I question everything, but then when I heard you speak, I didn't question. I felt it internally as the truth, is what I'm saying.
Well, no, that's not actually what was happening. What was happening is you have a guide, a spirit guide, who knows it's true. And so that person is influencing you to feel this way. But that doesn't mean it's your truth yet.
No, that's
Your
right.
truth.
Yes.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, this is something we want to discuss with you over the course of the next 2 days, because many of you believe that when you have these really strong feelings of confirmation, that it comes from an internal source. When frequently it's an external source.
And if we go back to your story at the beginning about the fellow who was the drug dealer and who had a vision of Jesus, A spirit gave him that vision, and now he believes this is the truth. Jesus is God, Jesus saves, and I must live a certain way. He hasn't yet gone through his own emotional exploration of belief. He's
And
relying
whether
on
that
the
is
Spirit.
true.
Yeah. So
And
it's
what
not,
I'm suggesting is you haven't either. And this is the tricky part, you see. It's sort of like you've got a good bond with your guide, who obviously has been around you since childhood as well, and caused you to investigate things that wouldn't otherwise be investigated given your background. And so this person has tried to guide you, but most people don't understand, that's not me having those feelings. It's them having the strong feelings that are when I hear it, the information from an external source get confirmed by them. And so you've got to be very careful here, because that might have happened, but that doesn't mean that you in your heart yet believe the thing they are confirming. It just means that there's a strong level of confirmation coming from an outside source that you're connected to. Right? And of course there are specific dangers in that, because if that strong level of outside confirmation happens to disagree with God's truth, now we're going to be in conflict about what is God's truth or not. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
Yeah.
that journey is ahead of you, of your own
Yeah.
establishment of belief.
And in fact, almost for the entire audience here, the same thing could be said. Many of you have got confirmation from your spirit friends that listening to Jesus is a good thing, not a bad thing. You think of many of your friends and neighbours and everything, they think the opposite, don't they? Yeah. Listening to a guy singing Jesus, that's a bad thing, And they even think you're in a cult. When how much influence have we had over your life aside from speaking publicly? Probably none, right? And yet they think that. So they have a lot of set beliefs already, most people do. And they are getting beliefs from spirits and other people who think the opposite. So who's right? This is the thing you must determine for yourself eventually. Now, if you're well guided, your spirit guides will back off in how much influence they have over time, and you will have to go through the process of confirming it for yourself.
And so that's why I said that journey is ahead of you, because your guide is a divine love guide.
Yep. And this is what he's going to do.
This is what's going to happen. And probably right starting from now, because we've had this conversation. Okay, well now's your chance to just work through some emotion. He feels like I've helped you this far.
Yep.
I've helped you to have some experiences and to really experiment in a feeling of confidence.
Yep.
To experiment. And now, gradually, I'll just step back on that confirmation so that you can now have your own worries and fears and all those things come up.
Emotionally come up.
So they can leave you.
So they can leave you. Yeah.
Yeah. But can I make one more point about your comments? And that was about the priority system that Jesus is introducing. Also, what you related is that, so the people culturally that you're speaking about who don't have a defined idea of God, we talked about this feeling of need to fit in. In their priority system, that is number one.
Yeah.
So that's very common pretty much the world over.
Almost every culture.
That people put number one, my family's acceptance. My society's acceptance usually is on a par.
Bit less.
Yep. But usually the society and the family are in pretty much agreement. And then that's my top beliefs, that my beliefs is to survive I must fit in. And so the beliefs we have about God are not examined at all. They're taken as...
They're just presumed.
They're presumed. And so when we ask people about God, anyone asks someone about God, usually they're responding from their belief system that the priority is to fit in. And God is largely unexamined inside of their life.
Yep. And inside of most religious faiths and even inside of most cultures, the issue of God is largely not resolved. And the reason why it's not is because if I resolve it to be different to what, say, Mary believes, now there's going to be conflict between Mary and I with regard to that belief. And if that belief is important to one of us, then of course that conflict will result in quite a lot of disagreement and disharmony, and therefore for most people when they have disagreement and disharmony, they also feel pain and suffering from that disharmony. And so in the end, most people go, well, if I engage this process of knowing these things, then what's going to happen to my life? And what happens in most people is they go, well, if my life's going to change too much, and in fact it's going to affect my family, my friends and everything, or it's going to change too much, then it's better that I don't change it at all. And if that means me suppressing my desire to find out whether there's a God or not, which by the way, most of us have had at some point, right? And then if that involves me suppressing that, then I'm prepared to do it because my priority system is forward.
Which really, you can bring back to your first point, which is about comfort. Most of us think comfort is my high priority,
Yep.
and this is how stagnation happens.
Yeah. So what we've found in our travels, this trip, is that the majority of people who've been listening to divine truth around the world have got to the point where their comfort levels are pretty much where they are and they're not going to change. And so one of the points of our trip is to make you uncomfortable. Now, of course, in America that's tough because most of you want to be comfortable. So,
Very firmly.
yeah, it's going to be tricky, isn't it, like one way or the other. If we're trying to make you, we're not trying to make you uncomfortable, we're trying to help you see that unless you're uncomfortable, you're not going to be changing. Yeah. Right? And so you're going to need to be uncomfortable for your own sake if you want to change. And many of you are going, but I've just got my life comfortable. Well, we don't want it more upset than it already is. You know, like it's hard enough believing in Jesus, talking to him, let alone face to face, than it is in me changing my entire life. Right? And so the majority of us have a tendency then to enter periods of long stagnation in our progress because we're unwilling to go through the discomforts. Yeah? Okay, so let's look at, as you pointed out too, your beliefs about God, most people have a very undefined belief about God, and yet the beliefs about God are the things that matter the most. So perhaps the thing we need to talk about first is your beliefs about God.
Now, there were some hands up just as you turned around to the book. Do you want to?
Yeah. Who had your hands up? So,
Courts
and side, and then okay. Yep.
I was going to ask, how do you gain a sense of like urgency and importance about correcting beliefs?
Well, that's a lot about seeing the importance of doing so. So you see, if you have faith that changing a belief is going to bring major benefits to your life, can you see you'll probably want to change the belief? But if you have a faith that says changing your belief is going to bring trauma to my life, can you see then you're probably not going to want to change your belief? So a lot depends on what faith you have about whether the change will be good or not for you. Right? Now, it's one thing for Mary and I to come along and say, no, it's going to be good, guys, go for it. It's a very different thing where you're faced with the difficulties in your own personal life, and then you're worried about your own comfort levels and worried about your health, and you're worried about all these other things. And you're worried about spirits, and once you hear about them, you worry about them. Generally before then you didn't worry about them at all, and then after you hear about them, then you worry about them. And so oftentimes for most people, the more they hear truth, the more they worry about it. And you get to a point where you're worrying about so much that you start thinking, well, I want to stop worrying. So what do I do to stop worrying? Well, instead of dealing with my worry, my fear, you could say, as an emotion, the average person doesn't do that. What they do is they just disconnect from the things they're worrying about, using denial, using suppression, using addictions, using even physical substances, food, alcohol, all sorts of things they'll use to disconnect from the process of feeling the fears that we have about change. So most of the time we're not motivated to change because we don't have faith that the change will be good for us. And it's very hard for God to convince us that it's going to be good when we have already got inside of us a belief that says it's not going to be.
well, I've been one of these people who's stagnated in this area, and especially about beliefs that I've got. So I'm trying to figure out how do I
Change.
feel urgent about that.
Yep.
Yeah, versus telling myself it's not that urgent. It's, you know,
Yeah.
do it later.
Yeah, but most people have a priority system inside that says me first. So when they look at their belief system, if we look at a flawed priority system, flawed red pen, flawed. So flawed priority system is anything to do with me, I fix first, right? So I'm unhappy, try to fix that. I've not got a good relationship, try to fix that. I've not got good friendships, try to fix that. I've got a physical ailment, fix that. Let's focus on fixing, in other words, let me be comfortable first. Is really what we're saying, isn't it? Like, so there's the addiction to comfort, and like I said, every Western country has a higher addiction to comfort than other countries. So there's this really strong sort of indication, me first. And the faith is saying, me first equals good for me. Right? That's the faith. The faith is saying, if I put me first, then it'll be good for me. But if somebody's saying to you, well, actually, that doesn't result in a lot of happiness in your life, and resolving these things doesn't help your life, to be honest, because the real priority system should be God first. God's laws first. Then your soul is third, right? Is the same. If your soul is third, that's not just you, that's the other half of you and you. Right? So when you sort of me first, you're even saying, I don't care about the other half of me, I just want to focus on me. Right? So there's a lot of false beliefs that drive that. Yeah. So the beliefs about what I am as a soul drives it. The beliefs about what I have faith in, like what is going to benefit my future, will drive it. So there's a whole set of reasons inside of me that's caused me to believe me first is a good thing, when actually the evidence in our life generally, usually, is that it hasn't worked out so far. Yeah. Makes sense? Cool.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. We were over here somewhere inside.
So I'm kind of largely in the same boat as how Dr. Pratha described.
Yeah.
Rebellious right from the beginning.
Yeah. So in other words, you're different to your family, different to your friends, you're investigating truth more than the average person.
I've got I cannot describe it and emphasize it enough, but I've got a huge love of truth.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I cannot stand up because I feel like I'm so weak that I might fall down. But
What's the question?
So in the whole process of investigating,
Yeah.
I still remember the time where I used disconnection as a mechanism to cope.
Yeah.
As a child, I would often go to the terrace of our apartment, and like at 14 years of age, I knew that I disconnected, but at 14 years of age, I'm like, why is this particular situation not making me cry?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is what normal humans, these are the situations where normal humans seem to cry. And
When you say normal humans, I don't know if there's many normal humans out there, to be honest.
And I'm not able to cry. And at that age, I didn't even know divine truth, but I'm like, this is supposed to be hurtful and sad, and I'm not able to feel that.
Yeah.
And so I would go often to the terrace and...
Can you see though, Si, that it's driven by a belief system? So this is the thing with these kind of belief systems in terms of priorities. Let's look at the belief system that's flawed, shall we? Do you know what it is?
I have to fit in with the rest.
Well, no, that's the end result of this belief system, you can say.
What's the belief that cut you off from crying, if we sort of summarise what you're saying?
Yeah. Why would you purposefully shut down you?
So,
Well, can you see there's a number of beliefs that you must have had to shut down you? Now, some of them have come from family, but some of them have come from you. So here's one that's come from you. Right? So remember I said that a false faith, let's call it a corrupt faith, is going to drive your actions. Right? The corrupt faith being, how do I deal with my emotions in this stressful situation? The corrupt faith says, if I withdraw, that is in my best interest. So withdraw, or not a D, it's a T, isn't it? Withdraw, or you could say denial of the emotion, or you could say zone out, if you want to call it that, or you could say go numb. You know, that's a belief you created. So your family didn't just come along and go, you go numb and everything's good. You have chosen, when you go numb, you everything worked out better. So now this has become a corrupt faith in you. It says, go numb. I'm faced with a challenging situation, go numb. I'm faced with a challenging situation, shut down. This is why you're prone to depression. Because you're faced with a challenging situation, you've told you're not allowed to get angry, you're not allowed to be sad. So you go numb, but when you go numb, the anger is suppressed, that causes depression, and then the sadness gets suppressed, that often causes other illnesses and problems as well. And so the corrupt faith is really driving the result. The corrupt faith being, if I believe that withdrawal works, it's good for me. I believe that zone out works. I believe that denial works. Right? So the problem is a corrupt belief that causes you to go into zone out, and then you get the results of the zone out, which are I'm numb emotionally, and you worry about it. So the worry about the numbness emotionally is really an effect of a problem, not the cause. The cause of the problem is the desire to withdraw from life whenever you're faced with a problem. Instead of confronting the problem head on, instead of confronting the problem and going through your feelings, most people have the feeling of, it's better if I just withdraw from the problem somehow. And if I can't withdraw externally from the problem, which we're not allowed to do generally as a child, what do? I withdraw internally. I use methods to withdraw internally. Your methods might be different to mine. You know, when I was a child, I just went outside. There were neighbours who had a cat, and I used to just sit on the porch outside and just pat the cat, you know, and just feel morose, but not actually deal with anything. Not actually have a confrontation with anybody. This is when I was, little, 3, 4, 5. Not actually have a rant, because I wasn't allowed to do that either. I wasn't allowed to be angry. I had a belief inside of me that I wasn't allowed to be, right, ever angry. So this caused my choices caused me to numb out, zone out. And so by the time I was 33, I didn't even know what a feeling felt like, really, because of that choice.
I have the same problem with love.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a concept of love.
Mm-hmm. An intellectual one.
And everything is intellectual with me.
Yeah. And you do a lot of, you've got spirits with you who do a lot of philosophizing. Rumination.
Yeah.
Yeah, they chew on the cud.
It's like a loop that I set up. Like I get to something,
yeah,
and then I go back right up, and I just keep looping.
Yes. And this is often caused by worry about making a decision. Right? So in other words, what we're saying is that I believe if I actually make a decision and do something, my life will change, but it might be for the worse. Right? And because I'm so fearful that it might be for the worst, I would rather not make a decision. So I think it's benefiting to not make a decision. So what I do then is I go, right, my corrupt faith is saying don't make a decision. So you could say my belief is that making decisions is not good. That's the belief. Every time I make a decision, something goes wrong in my life, so it's better to not make the decision. It's better just to zone out as much as I can. So I zone out of relationships, I zone out, I do, denial techniques, food, for a lot of men, video games, pornography, all sorts of different things men use to zone out, go numb. And we're zoning out of the real problems because we don't want to make a decision and bear the consequences of it. Make sense, Si? So this is what one of your tendencies, to not make choices, because if you make a choice, something will happen that's different that you don't necessarily want. Makes sense?
I have one more thing.
Sure.
I often use logic as a way to also numb out, and one of the
Can I just stop you for a sec? This whole idea that logic is actually logic is very, very simple. Because your belief system determines what you think is logical. So in other words, let's look at the situation of withdrawing. You think withdrawal is logical. Right? So your mind is saying withdrawal is a good thing, so it thinks it's logical. It's going to come up with it's going to support the feeling that you should withdraw. Your mind is just a silly tool, really. It's like a hammer, in a lot of ways. It does what the owner of the hammer desires. Right? So if the owner of the hammer desires to numb out, then it will numb out. If the owner of the hammer desires to philosophize and ruminate and not make decisions, then that's what it's going to do. If the owner of the hammer decides that, it's all logical, the decisions they're already making, then because it supports the emotion, then the mind's just going to go off on this, what it believes is this logical path, which won't have any resemblance to reality. But there's many atheists who believe they're being logical. There's many Christians who believe they're being logical. There's many Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and believe they're being logical. There's many agnostics who believe they're being logical. None of it means they are logical. It just means that they're using their mind to support their belief. And their belief, their heart, you could say their emotional state, what's going on inside of their soul dictates how they'll use their mind. This is how we end up with so many different beliefs, many of which are not actually logical, right? And those of us who pride ourselves on our logic think we're being more logical than everybody else is. But actually it's still based on beliefs that we're trying to avoid or trying to accept.
I think that makes a lot of sense why most of my 20s I spent debunking theory after theory after theory after theory.
That's right.
And it kind of frustrates me that I cannot debunk this one.
Yes. I meet a lot of people who spend, after they listen to Divine Truth and hear it for a bit, they spend the rest of the time trying to find a hole in it. Yeah. Because they're desperate to not take any action on it. Yeah. Because they don't know what the results of those actions may be in their life. And so what they do is they spend hours and days and weeks and months watching video after video and looking at everything, examining everything, reading everything, listening in detail to everything I'm saying, and what, whether I'm making mistakes in what I say, and it goes on and on and on. And if they find the one thing that supports the mind saying, I don't have to do anything because it's not right. Right? Now, for you, the one thing isn't that I'm playing with a bit of Jesus, right? But for most people, that's enough. Just the fact that a claim is being made is enough. But for many people who are afraid of decisions and the outcomes of decisions, they keep examining, and then before they know it, 10 years have gone past, and they think they know more divine truth, but have they acted on it yet? Generally not. And nothing's really changed in their life yet because they're too afraid to have it change anyway. And they're not dealing with the fear and the terror that exists in themselves that causes this lack of logical choice in their life. See, it makes sense, doesn't it, if you know something to be true, or you believe it's true, that you should act upon it and measure whether it's true. Yeah. Doesn't it? It's a logical choice to do. If I feel that, it's more loving for me to feel my emotions, then surely my next port of call would be, we'll feel my emotions and see what the results are. Do I feel more loving afterwards? Right? And measure the results and then feed that back into the decision. Right? But the average person doesn't make those decisions because the belief systems are saying, don't make any change unless you're certain. And but the emotion is saying, I need to make change. But I don't want to make any change unless I'm certain of its outcome. Because I don't want to have pain in there or discomfort in the outcome. And there's even a measure that says, if I'm uncomfortable, that means the outcome was bad. And of course, if I'm in a state of sin and God's in a state of love, then obviously any change I make is going to be uncomfortable for me in a state of sin. This is why in the spirit world, you go to the place where you're comfortable. Now, unfortunately, many of you are comfortable in San Diego or in LA or in America even. You're comfortable, right? Now, if you look at the average condition of a place and then see where you're comfortable, you can see, wow, if this is far removed from God's version of love and I'm comfortable in it, then that means that I'm going to have a lot of discomfort getting out of it. Can you see that? So just something to bear in mind with your progress is this. We've got what we've talked about, the spheres, right? To the perfect natural man, which is the sixth sphere. The whole of the earth at the moment is in the first sphere. So we're here in the hells, is where the earth is. Right? And we call it the hells, and spirits call it the hells because it's where all your trauma is. It's where you're living in a state of trauma, right? And it's constant trauma, constant feelings. Most of us have learnt to zone out of it. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. We're here in this house. Now, if we're comfortable here, that's a big problem. Can you see that? And the majority of people who are listening to divine truth all around the world are comfortable where they're living. And that would tend to indicate that they're comfortable in the hells, and it's going to be more discomfort if they start to get out of the hells than there is for them. They believe that there is going to be more discomfort getting out of the hells than staying in them. Right? And many of you, if you're not careful, you'll pass with that feeling. You'll pass to be more comfortable there, and you'll arrive in the hells and you'll feel comfortable there. And when somebody tries to take you to the second sphere to have a look, you'll feel uncomfortable. That's no good for your future because the second sphere and the third and fourth are more happy. But we're comfortable with our level of unhappiness.
Can the love for truth make you be comfortable, not be comfortable? So when I was in depression, when I took medication, it solved some of my other issues, including depression. And the moment I noticed that my stomach is being helped because of the medication that I took for the depression.
Mm-hmm. You've told me this story, but
I just said, well, that has to be the truth, and I have to stop the medication. So I stopped the medication, even though that I felt super uncomfortable. I couldn't even drink water at some point.
Yeah, but you're not addressing the cause of the depression. That's what you're uncomfortable addressing. The cause of the depression is the anger that you feel inside of you that's unexpressed, that you feel you're not allowed to express or act upon. Right? That's the cause of the depression. And you still feel you're not allowed to act upon it or do something about it or make decisions, right, about it. So the cause of the depression remains. Right? Now, this is what I mean by being comfortable in the hells. You're comfortable with depression. You're comfortable creating a situation where you don't have to act, but rather you're just going to feel numb and zoned out and depressed and sad about having to make choices you don't want to make. So you've got, if you think about your life at the moment, you've got a long list of feelings about the choices you should make, and you're not making hardly any of them, right? And so you're comfortable living in this state, which is a hellish state, by the way. This is what it feels like in hell. It feels like you can't get out of it, you can't do something different, because if you do something different, you're worried that things will get worse, not better, right? And so we often stay in this state where we believe what we've got now is the best it's going to be. That's the sort of feeling we have, but that's a feeling that is very common in the hell. So whatever is comfortable is the best now, right, for me. So the real discomfort is that you don't want to address the anger. You have a lot of reasons why you don't, some of which come from your family of origin, some of which you have inside yourself from the events you described even earlier about wanting to just, when you were 14, wanting to go outside and just ponder things rather than do something. You know, ruminate rather than decide. Yeah? And so these are all driven by fears and terrors that you're unwilling to address. And so a person gets angry about being unwilling, but then because they're not allowed to be angry either, they get depressed. Make sense? And that's not dealt with. Right? So the things that are dealt with are, you'd rather go, oh, I'll think about it and I'll change my medication, I'll get rid of the medication because I can logically see something's going wrong here, and so forth. But doing all of those things is really just all the things we do to avoid the real problem. We think we're taking actions that are still not benefiting us, because at the end of the day we're unprepared to take the action that will benefit us. Because fundamentally our corrupt faith is saying it won't benefit us. You follow? The faith is saying, if I do what I feel to be the right thing, in the end it'll turn out bad, and so it's better that I suppress myself and I don't do that. Yeah.
So no conflict.
Yeah, there's internal conflict that needs to be resolved, but it's only going to be resolved by action. See, a lot of you think that you're going to resolve your internal terrors by living in your terror and not doing anything about them. That's not the way it's going to get resolved. You're going to have to make a decision, take an action, and then you'll feel some things, and in the feeling of those things you will resolve. Yeah, which is a very different thing than just staying numb, zoning out, not making decisions and choices, and trying to keep your life as relatively stable as it possibly can be. You're not happy. And you can't be happy that way. You see, the average person believes there's sort of like a limit, isn't there, of happiness. So Mary and I find this when we're travelling a lot, where people sort of believe, I'm happy now, this is the happiest I'm ever going to get on earth. You can't be extremely blissfully happy on earth. It's impossible. Look at everything going on around us. It's impossible. So the average person goes, I'm happy with this level of happiness, whatever that is. And when I say happy, I wouldn't say you're happy with it. I would say that you're sort of comfortable with it. It's like an old, worn-out couch. You know? It might be 30 years old, and it's got its springs hanging out, and it's got its, it's all getting bare and...
But you've just got your little groove in.
you can wiggle things into it and go, I can sort of get comfortable here, and you're done, sort of thing. And many of us are like that with our life. We're sort of wriggled into this position where we're sort of comfortable, and we don't believe that it's going to be any better. And that's to do with our faith, and our faith is to do with our belief system. So what do we believe? What do you believe about anger?
It's pointless.
Yeah. What do you believe about decisions?
They're not going to result in good outcome.
Yeah. So those two beliefs are driving, that's honest, and those two beliefs are driving your life. And this is how 10 years can go past and no outcome. Another 10 years, no outcome. This is how people live together, like I said earlier, for 60 years, no outcome. Because fundamentally we've got some corruptions in our faith, which is our belief systems. And those belief systems push us into a direction in our life of inaction. Yeah. And then if you're not careful, you'll arrive in the spirit world and you'll realise you could have made a lot of actions a lot earlier. Like you could have, some things you should have made a decision when you were 25 and you left them until you died. You know, after you died, make it. You know, there's many people who do that, who live that life of, and they don't experience the regret until they've gone to the spirit world and they go, oh, I should have done this when I was 25. I could have had a much better life on earth if I had just done that one thing. You know, and sometimes that one thing could be just, you know, like change of belief in God, or change of belief in emotion, or, you know, leave your family, you know, behind. Let them be what they are, or, you know, leave your partner behind. Let them be what they are and you change, or, you know, give up the idea that you're going to have to nurse your children for the rest of your life. Just, it can be just one belief. You know, for many women, the one belief is my definition of being a good woman is being a good mother, and so they hold on to that for their entire life, and then they realise in the spirit world there's no children around them in that state generally, and so they go, well, what do I do now? What did I do with my whole life? Like, who am I? I don't even know who I am. I did everything for my family. I don't even know what I like and what I don't like, and what my loves are and what my passions are. I've got no idea. You know, because they were too worried, too afraid, you could say too terrified to make different decisions. And then when you get to the spirit world, looking back on your life, at times you will do that and you go, why didn't I make that decision sooner? And I personally have been very thankful that the law of attraction has forced me into changing my life. Because a lot of my life I would not have changed if I didn't have that. You know, I would have just avoided change. You know, with my wife that I married in this life, that we had 2 children, I stayed in the relationship for 7 years after I knew that she didn't love me. What a waste of 7 years. I could have been in a different relationship where I was loved. I could have learned more about love if I had left, but I stayed. And I knew she didn't love me, but I stayed. And so we choose to do things because we are, and these examples are not specific to you, but to me. You know? And so we choose to do things that are often just based around our fears, not to do with making good decisions. See, our logical brain says, anytime you're afraid, don't do it. It's not a very logical brain, because it's saying every time you're afraid, don't do it. But there are so many things that you need to do so that you can work through your fears. And we often don't. But fundamentally for you, Simon, the inaction, the desire for inaction, you've got to look at it as to what is causing it. Yeah. We'll go up to that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock already.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just, Jennifer.
Yeah. Are you naming Sam?
No, I don't think
Just make sure the mic's.
make sure the mic's close to you.
So I don't really know how to put this into words, but you know how you said that when you're talking and you
Just
say,
hold that mic closer for me.
you know how that you said when you can be talking and you say a word that we have different beliefs about.
Yeah.
So I feel that with the word faith,
Yep.
and it's like it's this big thing because you say faith a lot.
Yep.
And I have this belief, like, throughout my life, people have said, just have faith,
Gotta have faith.
and everything will work out.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's a big cop-out.
Yeah, it is.
And so, anytime I hear the word faith, I'm kind of just like, don't know how to like bring in your truth on it or God's truth on it.
Yep.
And get rid of that so I can, because I can't do anything with faith right now, I feel like.
But without faith, see, if you think of what faith is first, it's not this sort of fundamental acceptance of everything you're told. It's not, that's not faith.
Or, as you're saying, denial of sort of responsibility or reality or action.
Yeah, that's not faith.
That's not faith.
Sure. So what is faith? So faith is something that you believe will happen in your future if you take some actions now.
Good or bad.
That are good or bad, yeah. So in other words, let's say it from a bad perspective. Let's say I believe that I will lose my relationship with my husband if I tell him the truth. So in other words, if I say the truth, let's say I've cheated on him, and I say, let's say if I tell him that truth, he will leave me for certain. Right? It's the faith saying that. And so it's not good if I tell him the truth. So you can say that's a faith that telling the truth is bad.
Right.
Can you see that? So that's what I would call a corrupted faith. A faith that something, if you do something good, it'll end up bad. Right? Many of us have that same faith with love. So an example of that is if I open my heart to somebody, they'll hurt me. So that's an example of believing that me opening my heart is going to lead to something bad. So that's what I would classify as a corrupt faith. A faith that says something, something that people say is good will end up bad, sort of thing. Right? Then there's the other kind of faith that says, if I do something good, it'll end up good. So in other words, a faith that is actually based on some truth would say, if I tell the truth, whatever happens will be the best outcome. Right? So that's, you could say, a faith in what is true, or you could say a faith in what is good. Right? Now, the majority of us have what I'd classify as the corrupted version of faith, which is we have the faith in what is bad. So what I mean by the faith is you think for your future that if you do a certain thing, it'll turn out bad. Right? Now, when we talk about faith, when Mary and I talk about faith, what we're saying is to gain some trust that if you trust in you could say God's truth, that whatever you do will turn out good. But how are you going to come to terms with it in the long term? So an example I'll give from my own life. When I was 33, I started getting quite depressed and down. And the reason why I did is because I was a bit like Si, in that I had to make a lot of decisions in my life that I didn't really want to make. Right? And so I came to the conclusion that it was best not to make them and just best to ignore the whole thing for a bit, if I could. Now, of course, I believed that would be the best outcome. But what happened was me taking that action that I had faith in. So I had faith that if I shut myself down, it would all be better. That was my faith. And what I did with then was I measured the results of that faith. And the results were I got sadder and sadder and sadder and sadder. Right? So I started going downhill, physically and emotionally. I went downhill. So what I did was I took an action, right, which was inaction. And then I measured the result, which was I got worse. Now, what that helped me do was it helped me see that inaction was something I shouldn't have faith in. Can you see what I mean? So what it did is it said, so in terms of my faith, I started going, before then I had faith that if I didn't act, things would work out better.
So the word faith is like the word believe.
Well, faith is different than belief. In belief, faith needs to be based on truth for it to be faith. You could say beliefs that are true
Okay.
are faith. But how do you prove they're true is what I'm saying to you. And what I'm saying is you take an action and you measure the result, and that's how you prove they're true. You experiment with your life. Now, the fundamental problem most of us have is we don't want to experiment with our life, we want to experiment with somebody else's. You know, like, we don't want it to be our life that we're experimenting with, because what if happens if we take an experiment and it works out bad? And my feeling of that is we'll just change it. You see, but the average person's feeling is, I don't want the bad. And I'm going, well, the bad is good because it tells you what you chose was not good. So even when you take an action that is out of harmony with truth, like I did, I took an action out of harmony with God's truth, which was suppress myself emotionally and things will work out, and it didn't work out.
And God's truth about that is that that's more loving to you than hate.
No action. That's right. Yeah. If you take no action, there's nothing to measure. Is there? So no action means inactivity. Inactivity means no outcome. No outcome means nothing to measure. Right? Of course, full inactivity means that in the long term there will be an outcome. So what I chose was no action in my life for a while. The outcome wasn't nothing. The outcome was pain, sadness, and depression. That was the outcome. So in measuring the outcome, I went, I had faith in doing nothing, and it was bad.
So then after that, you would probably need to work through your fears about doing the opposite.
Correct. Doing something. Yeah, so I had to work through my fears about, in this case, leaving my wife. We've been married 13 years. And I had 2 children. In the relationship I'm in. And I had to work through my fears about leaving that relationship. That makes sense?
So then how does faith relate to fear?
Well, everything you're afraid of is untrue. So faith and fear have really no relationship. Faith and truth have the relationship. And anything that you're acting out of harmony with truth, you're also acting in harmony with fear. And every time you act in harmony with fear, that is not faith, that is false belief, which is different to faith. Faith is based on true beliefs.
But then, like say you make an action, you take an action that's a bigger action, like moving across the country, and you're changing your whole life, right?
No. No, I wouldn't classify moving across the country as changing your whole life.
Okay.
So you and I are disagreeing there. Moving anywhere in the world is not changing your life. Because you take yourself with you.
I'm coming from a place where you're uprooting your family as well, so like they're being affected by this.
No.
The biggest thing that impacts your family is
Your emotional
like your
state.
children is your emotional state.
Correct.
So whether you're here or in Canada
Who
or
you are,
Japan.
and that changing is going to affect your life more than anything else. So you changing from one location to another location, but it's American, it's all going to be the same. No, what I mean by that is it's like you're going from America to Turkey or something, where you've got many more changes to make, is there? And there's many of you that have done this, right? You've gone from a country, like already we've met some of you from India, right? You've gone from India to America, huge changes, language, culture, religion. That's a big change, that's a bigger change, but it's still not much. Because in the end, unless you change, nothing much around you is going to change.
So I guess I'm not being transparent because I'm coming from a place where we're going to move across country and we're going to blow up pretty much everything we're doing where we currently are and start living a different kind of lifestyle. So that's what I kind of mean by.
And what's wrong with that?
And my question was, So if you have faith
Mm.
in the truth, God's truth,
Yep.
that if you're doing a good thing,
It'll work out.
right. But is there refinement in that? Like, if you're not doing as a whole, like every single decision you're making is a good thing.
Of course, the refinement is eventually you want to make every decision in alignment with God's truth.
But say you're acting and you think, like, I think this is a more loving path. And you get to your new situation and it turns out badly.
Yep. So we spent a couple of years there, and
You've got to examine how you measure good or bad too here.
yeah, and why you believe it's bad, and what causes you to believe it's bad. See, most of you currently measure things financially as
Right.
well, don't you?
Yeah.
Which is what you're doing.
My husband is pretty good at that.
Yeah. So, you know, the average person measures things financially, but financially is like nothing really, is it really? Financial is really a creation of your imagination. You know, you pull out a US dollar note and you believe it's worth $1 and you believe it's going to buy, well, not much at all nowadays, but it buys $1.60 Australian is what it buys. But you believe it's worth that much, but that's only a belief, and it only works when everybody else believes the same thing. And so it's really a construct. A lot of the things we believe in are constructs of an unreal world that we have come to believe is real. We have these beliefs that money is real, that, you know, making decisions about money are the wisest decisions we make, which is not true actually. You know, most of your happiness is not linked to money, it's linked to relationships, firstly, and friendships, and relationship with God, things like that. That's where most of your happiness will be. And so money is like whether you have none. You know, when I came to the earth, I had none. There's many times in this earth, in this life, I had none, and there's many times in the first century I had none. Right? So making a decision based on money is really a silly thing to do. But the average person in the Western world in particular does it for all sorts of reasons, because there's huge amounts of terror most of you have about not having it. Right? And I've not had any at times in my life, and it's been fine. So now we're drilling down though into your personal life. And I don't know, I still haven't covered things about the belief systems, which we need to focus our attention on, right? But what I say about the beliefs will apply to your personal life. But to be truthfully honest with yourself, you're going to have to look at where your priorities are. So if your priority is money, financial security, in your case, your priority is different to your husband's, right?
Well, we're moving away from that priority. So we are going to move with really no plan financially.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be facing a lot of fears.
Well, what are your fears? So I'm not necessarily needing you to answer the question, but the reason why I paused is, can you see, a lot of times we barely even think about what they are. We're just going, a lot of times we end up in these arguments with others, you know, arguments with ourselves, based upon all these terrors or fears that we have internally that we haven't really resolved as to why we have them and what they are. So when it comes to money, like you guys all know, when it comes to money, you got none. What are your fears? You feel like you're going to be homeless in a Western country. In any country, I don't know if that's true, but in a Western country, how would you end up homeless? Like, there would have to be some very serious decisions you're making constantly to end up homeless. And the average of you wouldn't make those decisions, so it's going to be pretty hard for most of you in this audience to end up homeless. Right? So, what are the fears really?
Won't be able to get our comfort.
Sorry?
Won't be able to get our comfort.
Won't be able to get our comforts. That's a big fear. In America, that's a huge fear. In Europe, huge fear. Australia, huge fear. Won't be able to be comfortable. You know, might have to work hard for a bit. Is a big fear most people have. Like, they go, I worked hard for this period of my life, now I want my comfort. And I'm going, well, why not work hard all your life? Working hard's fun. Like Mary and I, we've probably worked 12 hours a day easily. You know, on this trip, not good on this trip because we haven't had enough time to ourselves, but we have worked every day on the trip. And it's not like it's bad. There's all sorts of things that it's exposing emotionally that are good, that we need to work through. Yeah. So I don't sort of see if you're measuring everything financially, which is a belief system, by the way, that financial is more important than other things. So that's a belief system which will taint a lot of decisions if you're not careful, right? So when you believe that, you're now going to get, like, you're prepared to even have an argument with each other, aren't you? Like, let's say Mary wanted to buy something and I'm worried about money. Anything she wants to buy, I'm going to have an argument with her about, probably. Because I want to save the money and she wants to spend it. I don't want her spending it, so. And I'll come up with all sorts of reasons. I earned the money, not true, because it's obviously combined effort. You know, but I can come up with all sorts of arguments which will be all unloving and all, in my mind, logical. Because the money issue, my fear of having lack is driving the decision. So unless I fundamentally deal with the belief that there is lack, in God's universe there is no lack. Lack is only created by governments and people. It's not, you look at everything God created, there's abundance, and every time human gets involved, there's lack. You know, it's like it amazes me sometimes. It's like water, there's abundance. What are we doing now? You have to buy it. Like, there's lack. Like, but God created this whole system where water is just freely available from the heavens, right? But what did humans do to that? Well, I think in your country, in some states, they've outlawed collecting rainwater, haven't they? Yeah. So create lack. Create lack. You know, let's outlaw this, outlaw that. Create more lack. Create more lack. When you create more lack, people are in more fear. When they're in more fear, you can tell them what to do and they'll listen because they're afraid. You know, when the more fear they have, this is the whole point of things like 9/11 and everything, isn't it? Like, create more fear. Take away more of what you believe, things that are, you know, that are good things because you're afraid. And most people are totally willing to have all sorts of things taken away from them when they're afraid. If they're told it's for their best interest. Yeah. So this is something we need to change. And fear is not a good thing. This is something I wanted to discuss with you today, is how your decision-making processes internally and how they're based upon this corruption of faith, and then how they're involving all sorts of, you could say, participants, many of whom you can't see in your day-to-day decisions in your day-to-day life. Right? And it's all driven by this internal feeling that the things that we're told are good are not good. They end up bad, is what most of us believe. Most of us actually have very high, strong feelings of hopelessness. We do. And we have complete feeling of hopeless, that everything is hopeless. What's the point of doing something righteous? Because it ends up bad anyway. What's the point of doing something, changing something? You know, hold on desperately to what you have, is the general feeling. And most of us are like, you know, I often think of us like we're hanging, you know, imagine there's a cliff, you know, and you're hanging on the edge of the cliff on the top. And this is how most of us perceive our life. It's like they're just hanging there, doing life, holding on to life no matter what. Afraid to just sort of let go of and just see what happens. Most of us are terrified because we don't understand how much the terror is governing all of our life. Right? And so when it comes to our relationship with God in particular, and when it comes to our relationship with ourselves, secondly, we are terrified of developing those relationships generally. Let's have a break now, though. To come back at 2. Is that right with you?
Can I just check in with everyone about the temperature?
Is it too cold, too hot? Who's cold? Who's hot? Right,
Just
so,
right, just right.
just right. Right, so judging all of that, it's a little cold still, is that right? So we might put it up. I think that was maximum. Too late.